Radio guys, today we're going to be looking at the Australian Labor Party. Now I was just doing some reading in the history and the policies and what the Labor Party is, how it works, etc, just to make sure I know what I was talking about, just to double check and things like that. And I figured I'd share everything I found with you guys because why not? So, what the fuck is the Australian Labor Party? I'm going to be looking through several documents here and I'll mention which ones I'm quoting from when I quote. As I've mentioned before, the Labor Party of Australia is the major centre-left political party of Australia. It currently competes with the Liberal Coalition, which involves the Liberal Party and the Nationals, and they're sort of the two big players in the two-party system in Australia, with the Greens sort of nipping at the heels and a slew of independents nipping at everyone's heels, I suppose. Possibly the most important document we're going to be looking at today is the Australian Labor Party National Constitution, and that's totally available on their website and all that sort of stuff, and I think they look over it every year at their national conference, but the one they have on their website was adopted on the 26th of July 2015, so let's have a little look. Right, so I've skipped past part A because that's just a bunch of definitions and legal stuff, and we're skipping on to part B. So we have part B, objectives and principles. Dun, 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 dun. So, origins. The Australian Labor Party had its origins in A, the aspirations of the Australian people for a decent, secure, dignified and constructive way of life. B, the recognition by the trade union movement of the necessity for a political voice to take forward the struggle of the working class against the excesses, injustices and inequalities of capitalism. And C, the commitment by the Australian people to the creation of an independent, free and enlightened Australia. Now keep those points in mind when we start talking about what the Labor government does. So on to the objectives. What does the Australian Labor Party actually want to do? The Australian Labor Party is a democratic socialist party and has the objective of the democratic socialisation of industry, production, distribution and exchange to the necessary extent to eliminate exploitation and anti-social features in these fields. So they're not complete socialists, they're not going to nationalise everything like Venezuela, they're just going to do it to eliminate exploitation and anti-social features. The problem with this, with many other political documents and legal documents, exploitation and anti-justice, very, very broad terms. What does this mean by this? What is exploitation? You'd probably think something like wage theft, being underpaid, things like that. But what is anti-social features? What does that mean? Because you know what's anti-social? Shooting someone with a gun that you might have bought from the shop. So is the Labor Party, theoretically, if guns were legal in Australia, would they have nationalised all the guns because it's anti-social? What does that mean? What about bouncers? It's quite anti-social to wrestle someone to the ground and throw them out of the bar. Will all the bouncers be nationalised? It's very, very broad. This socialist agenda was established in 1921, so almost 100 years ago. But it has since been amended, following the sort of collapse of socialism in Australia post-Second World War, with a couple of amendments. So, the Australian Labor Party stands for the right to own private property. Yay! They're not going to take everything. The maintenance and support of a competitive, non-monopolistic private sector, including small businesses and farming, controlled and owned by Australians, operating within clear social guidelines and objectives. So they're not total socialists. They do permit a free market and private property. That's good. I like that. But then we get on to some more troubling clauses, which actually was the first one. So I skipped over that for dramatic purposes. The Labor Party also stands for the redistribution of political and economic power so that all members of society have the opportunity to participate in the shaping and control of the institutions and relationships which determine their lives. So they are a government-centric political party. They admit that political relationships determine people's lives rather than living in a completely free stateless society, for example. So they will be interested in redistributing wealth. That does come under the economic label. So they are fundamentally a redistributionist and interventionist party. This is further evidenced by their desires to have state enterprises into the free market. Now that of course does not make it a free market, because if, say, I'm running a cafe and I, buy my beans and my grinders with a certain amount of money, and then the government decides to make a cafe, they can just tax people or print money or borrow money, and they can basically have unlimited revenue at any point in time. So it cannot be fair. I will never be able to compete with that sort of thing. So of course, they're not really interested in a free market. They would love state sort of unfairness to come into it. They're also in favour of strategic social ownership of natural resources, whatever that means. I'm just going to read that as they would like to nationalise natural resources. Bit of a tongue twister. Alright, if we keep going down, they want the restoration and maintenance of full employment. That's pretty cool. The abolition of poverty. Yay, that sounds pretty good. And the achievement of greater inequality in the distribution of income, wealth, and opportunity. That's a little bit of a problem. Because there never will be equality in those things. Abe Lincoln was wrong on this one particular thing. People are not born equal. And people do not make the same choices. People have the freedom to choose to do whatever they want. Which is great. Freedom of choice is great. But this means that some people are going to make choices that makes them less economically viable. The greatest example of this is women taking time off work to have children. Now, if you take the appropriate amount of time off work, say a year or two, to raise your children, that's 1 or 2 years that your peers who are competing for your position, or anyone else in the market competing for your position, can grow their skills, get more experience, etc., etc. It does make you less competitive. So, this is a problem when Labour says they want to have equality of distribution of income. Also, very interesting that the word distribution is used. This is something Stefan Molyneux has brought up. Income, wealth, and opportunity aren't distributed throughout society. They're earned. You don't get distributed your money or distributed your opportunities. Say if you're on such things as where your parents decide to have you, where you're raised and things like that. You earn those things. I earn my income when I work. I'm not distributed my income by some overseer or something like that. I have to work for it. I have to earn it. Moving on. The Labour Party wants social justice and equality for individuals, the family, and all social units. What do they mean by social justice? That is very subjective. Social justice will change over time. Way back in the old moral panics of the last century, social justice would have been banning the Beatles for saying they were bigger than Jesus because you don't want your children to be corrupted, and banning Elvis because he would make your teenage daughter have premarital sex, sort of things like that. So social justice, total subjective term. And also we have equality for individuals. What type of equality, Labour Party? Do we want equality of opportunity, or do we want equality of outcome? Now, you can't have equality of outcome and freedom at the same time. If they want equality of outcome, they are not a pro-freedom party. If they want equality of opportunity, well, they've already done that because all Australians have equal opportunities. Now, here's a funny one. I found a contradiction already. The Australian Labor Party seeks to recognise and protect the fundamental political and civil rights, including freedom of expression, the press, assembly, association, and religion, the right to privacy, the protection of the individual from the oppression of the state, and democratic reform of the Australian legal system. Now, what trips up my bullshit sensor is the protection of the individual from oppression of the state. This cannot stand if the Labor Party is a redistributive and interventionist government. Because is the state not oppressing you when it taxes your money to redistribute it to someone else? Is the state not oppressing you when they unfairly compete with you by opening, say, a coffee shop that they can fund with unlimited money? If that's not oppression of the state, I don't know what is. Very interesting. The Labor Party also wishes to discourage discrimination and exploitation based on class, race, sex, whatever. That's fine. The recognition of prior ownership of Australian land by Aborigines. Yeah, sure, whatever. Prior ownership, it doesn't belong to them anymore. And a commitment to the return of established traditional lands. Recognition and encouragement of diversity of cultural expression and lifestyle within the Australian community. That sounds alright. I have no problem with recognising different cultures and encouraging them to do their cultural thing. I don't care. Just do your thing as long as you don't tread on me, bro. We want to conserve Australia's natural resources. Yeah, fine. Bit of environmentalism never hurt anyone, except for the Chinese GDP. The Australian Liberal Party finally wants to maintain world peace and wants an independent Australia in world affairs. That would seem to be rather isolationist. But it's not. It's more like deferring. Australia must commit to resolve international conflicts through the UN. Now, the UN sort of drags its heels on everything. They haven't said a word about South Africa. They only really declare crises when stuff has already happened. So the UN, I don't know, it doesn't seem to do much, and we get them heaps of money anyway. Doesn't seem like it's working out for us. Right, and finally, the recognition of the right of citizens to work for progressive changes consistent with the broad principles of democratic socialism. So the question is the Labor Party actually socialistic? Well, they have the clause saying, we are a democratic socialist party. They are interested in redistribution of wealth, or basically the stealing and giving away of wealth. Kind of like Robin Hood, except if Robin Hood was the Baron in the situation. So it's really just the powerful taking from the weak and giving it to whoever they please. But then they do respect the right to private property, which isn't very socialistic, and they do respect the right for a non-monopolistic free market. So, I don't know, they're really weird. It's like they're virtue signaling by saying they're democratic socialists, but in reality they're just boring centrists, I guess, just capitalists. I don't know, it's weird. This divide, however, in principles, could be explained by the various factions of Labor. Now, like any political movement, the Labor Party has factions. So, like the Democrats of the United States with the neoliberals and the progressives, and the Republicans with evangelicals, neocons, Bushites, Trump populists, the Labor Party has two main factions. These are colloquially known as the Labor left and the Labor right. And we will start off with the Labor right today. So, quote Wikipedia. The Labor right is the organised, moderate, centrist and social democratic faction of the Australian National Party. It tends to be economically liberal and socially conservative. Labor right is a broad alliance of various state right and centre-leaning factions. An overriding stated theme of Labor right is balance between social progressive change and conservative economic management as the pathway to community development and growth. The Labor right currently holds 29 of Liberals' 69 seats in the House of Representatives and 11 of its 26 seats in the Senate. On to the Labor left. The Labor left, quote Wikipedia, also known as the Socialist left and Progressive left, is an organised democratic socialist faction of the Australian Labor Party. Its policy positions include party democratisation, economic interventionism, progressive tax reform, and refugee rights. We can all probably guess what form these tax reforms take and how many refugees they want. Now, the Labor left controls 31 of Labor's 69 seats in the House of Representatives and controls 14 of its 26 seats in the Senate. So it has more political power than the Labor right. Currently, the Labor Party is run by a Labor right leader known as Bill Shorten. Bill Shorten threw his hat in the ring to run the Labor Party after the 2013 defeat of Labor's Kevin Rudd. He was opposed by a Labor left candidate who is known as Anthony Albanese. Quote Wikipedia, Shorten subsequently gained 63.9% of the party caucus vote and 40.8% of the rank and file members' vote, which, when weighted equally, gave Shorten a 52.02% victory over Albanese. So the Labor right narrowly won out over the Labor left. In his first speech, Shorten acknowledged the role of women in his election success. This will tie in to something else I will be speaking of later on. Shorten thinks that the voting age should be lowered to 16. This is more in line with his Labor left. Compatriots, socialists always want to lower the voting age because younger people tend to be more socialistic. In March 2016, Shorten committed that the party would oppose any effort to extend discrimination law exemptions to allow people who reject a same-sex marriage to deny goods and services to same-sex couples. Yet another one of his restrictions on the free market. If you don't want to serve someone, you shouldn't have to. And if someone doesn't want to serve you, just take your services somewhere else. That's the beauty of capitalism. You have lots of people competing for the same market. Oh, and I almost forgot, last election on live TV, he said to the Australian public that Malcolm Turnbull's Liberal Party would privatise Medicare. This was, of course, a blatant lie, a fear-mongering tactic designed to increase his support, as people were worried they were going to lose their free, quote upon quote, free healthcare. Now, we get onto the thing that really piked me and made me want to make this video. We have Labor's stance on affirmative action for women within the Labor Party. Now, the affirmative action of the Labor Party began in 1994. And the most recent constitution on the Labor Party's website, I'll just read it out to you. The ALP is committed to men and women in the party working in equal partnership. It is our objective to have 50% of women at all levels in the party organisation and in public offices the party holds. To achieve this, the party adopts the affirmative action model in this clause. So, for now, minimum percentage means 40%. 40% of women in all seats held by the ALP, all seats that can be won with a 5% increase in the two-party preferred vote, and all other seats to be pre-selected. This is officially known as the Justin Trudeau party makeup model, I believe. But I'm not an expert. If we read into it, we can see some interesting points. For casual vacancies in the Senate and House of Representatives, if less than the minimum percentage of the remaining positions are held by women, the vacancy must be filled by a woman. If at the close of nominations for a pre-selection for a group of seats or positions, if the requirements of the above paragraphs, so 40% minimum, such and so forth, cannot be met, nominations for that group of seats or positions must be reopened. If after a ballot for a pre-selection for a group of seats or positions which do not meet the above requirements, nominations for that group of seats or positions must be reopened and a fresh ballot, if necessary, conducted. So I'm no expert. I'm not claiming to be super smart in any kind of Labour policies or politics, but the way I see it is it goes a little something like this. You are the Labour Party. You want to put 10 senators into the Senate. You put it to a vote. 7 men and 3 women are voted in by the party and the rank and file members. Unfortunately, this isn't progressive enough. So what happens is you have to redo the vote and redo the vote and redo the vote until you get 4 women. This, of course, is very insulting, I feel, towards women. This basically admits that women are too weak and incompetent to compete with men, and as such, must have the proverbial racetrack shortened, so to speak. I find it very patronising. Imagine if in a school carnival, for instance, obviously you have boys races and girls races, but you put the boys and girls together. Now, obviously, boys are more athletic than girls on average. There are exceptions. I'm not unaware of that. But generally, the boys will smash the girls. So 100-metre sprint, boys smash the girls every time. But with the affirmative action model, to make everything fair, we're going to start the women 50 metres ahead. And when women win, we're meant to go, yay, women are better than men. So good, so many women are winning, it's meant to be good. It's so dumb. It's so patronising. People would freak out about this for, treating women like little children. Back to the National Constitution. Each state branch is encouraged to implement these clauses in their rules. Now, what happens if you don't do this? Well, as I've read, quote, the new rules will be strictly enforced if a state electorate council or federal electorate council fails to meet the quota. It will be denied the right to send its delegates to the state conference, which is the party's supreme policy-making forum. I view this as a very comply or die policy. After all, if you can't bring up your ideas at your party's big conference about where you think the party should be taken, you're not going to get re-elected, as you will never be able to deliver on your election promises. You'll just have to hope and roll with what the rest of the party does. And additionally, there is well, it's not even implicitly implied, but we all know what happened. The haranguing from sort of your own party. Oh, we regret very much that Senator Anderson decided, not to comply with our, beautiful female-only party. You would be harangued from all sides. So yeah, that's the Australian Labor Party. There's a bunch of other things to talk about. You can check out their website. They're talking about acting on live in exports, protecting penalty rates. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. But these are the things I want to talk about, and if you want to look into it, you want to look into it. Now, why did I make this video? Well, if we have a look at the Labor Party, we can see that they are very close to controlling the House of Representatives, less so the Senate. So they've always got half the power in the Senate, and they run 5 of the 8 state governments of Australia. They are a major party, yet they are utterly opposed to at least my political ideology of sort of libertarianism, the government can go fuck itself and stop fucking with me sort of mentality. And I really wanted to bring up sort of the hypocrisy and the sort of contradictions of what Labor does. If we have a look, their slogan is a fair go for Australians, yet they're totally in favour of things that are not a fair go, such as interventionism, redistributionism, quotas, and things like that. And if I'm honest, if I had to pick who's going to win the next election, it's going to be Labor. As I've mentioned before, an incumbent party who's just had a leadership spill loses the next election. It's just what happens in Australian politics. People hate that sort of thing. And this is, one of, the latest in many, many spills, and people are goddamn sick of it, and Labor will just use it as an election issue. So, to all my fellow Australians, I urge you to welcome our new quasi-socialist overlords. Enjoy!